Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Zwecker, the Executive Director of the Indoor Environments Association, formerly known as ARST. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Radon-Smoking Synergy, Proven Effective Strategies to Lower Your Risk for Lung Cancer. As November is Lung Cancer Awareness Month and November 21st marks the annual Great American Smokeout Tobacco Awareness Holiday. Considering tobacco smoke and radon exposure are the two leading causes of lung cancer, and exposure to both, that is synergistic risk, heightens the probability of developing the disease. It is important to acknowledge the benefits of radon exposure risk reduction and the benefits of tobacco cessation, and to help link individuals with proven effective strategies to eliminate both from impacting individuals and families across the U.S. Before we begin, we want to note that all references to tobacco and tobacco products within this presentation refer to commercial tobacco and nicotine products and not the tobacco and/or other plant mixtures grown or harvested and used by American Indians and indigenous people for sacred purposes. We are honored today to have three presenters, Nate, Kevin, and Jen. Nathan Burden Jr. attended Carnegie Mellon University as a physics major with graduate studies in nuclear engineering. He is a former nuclear operator at the decommissioned shipping port LWBR Atomic Power Station and Beaver Valley Nuclear Power Station in Pennsylvania, a former radiation decontamination health physics foreman for applied health physics with special personal protective equipment, and a former OSHA certified training instructor. Nate has over 30 years of experience in radon testing using short-term, long-term passive radon devices, along with several continuous radon and work-level monitors. He is a special consultant of radon testing and mitigation for the DoD American Army facilities. Kevin Stewart is Director of Environmental Health for the American Lung Association and leads efforts on informing the public about air pollution, its health effects, its sources and means of control. Kevin represents the American Lung Association before federal, state, regional, and local agencies engaged in public policy on clean indoor and outdoor air and climate change. In addition to serving on the Lung Association team that coordinates work of the Leadership Council for the National Radon Action Plan, for decades he has managed statewide grant-funded programs to reduce indoor radon. Kevin also assists in creating and presenting the ALA's annual State of the Air report that tracks and grades Americans' exposure to unhealthy levels of ground-level ozone pollution and short and long-term particulate pollution. Kevin serves on the board of directors of the Indoor Environments Association and on the ARST Consortium on National Radon Standards Executive Stakeholder Committee. He is a speaker on numerous topics related to air quality, health, and public policy. Kevin holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical Engineering from Princeton University and has been a member of the ALA staff since 1987. And Jennifer Falkenroth serves as the Senior Director of Nationwide Tobacco Programs and Tobacco Cessation Content Expert for the American Lung Association. In this role, Jen advises all mission activities at local, state, and national levels to ensure a comprehensive, evidence-based public health framework, including education, awareness, behavior modification, community mobilization, and systems change for serving unique community needs. Jen brings with her 20 years experience in tobacco and nicotine dependence treatment in both clinical and community-based settings. Jen holds a tobacco treatment specialist certification from the Mayo Clinic, a national certificate in tobacco treatment practice, and national certification in nicotine and tobacco treatment through NADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, and nationally certified professional in tobacco treatment through the American Heart Association and ATUD, the Worldwide Association for the Treatment of Tobacco Use and Dependence. Through a partnership between ALA and the Indoor Environments Association, this webcast aims to equip IEA members, radon and vapor intrusion professionals, and their families with education on radon smoking synergy and how their exposure heightens lung cancer risk. In addition, the presenters today will be reviewing proven effective strategies for reducing lung cancer risk and provide access to programs to support improved lung health for all. I'd like to invite you all to post any questions you may have in the Q&A tab throughout the presentation, and we will conclude with a Q&A session to address them at the end. We've got a lot of great information to cover, so with that, I will turn it over to Nate Burden to talk radon. Nate?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, or good morning, depending on where you're at. My job is to talk about basically Radon 101 and a little bit about the synergistic effects, the science behind that. Next slide. So the radon, basically radon is a radioactive gas that comes out of the ground. It's tasteless, odorless. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. It's produced by the breakdown of uranium and radium. Basically, when it comes out of the ground, it comes out as a gas. EPA says about 15% of the homes in the U.S. have unsafe radon levels. And also, check out this, radon carries approximately 1,000 times the risk of death as any other EPA carcinogen. Next slide. Just another slide to go over what radon is. Basically, radon is a cancer-causing gas. Like carbon monoxide, it's tasteless, odorless, and colorless. It breaks down into radon radioactive particles, the radon decay products, and we'll talk more about that later. And radon really is the second leading cause of lung cancer. Tobacco smoke is the #1 cause of lung cancer. Next slide. Radon by the numbers. Excuse me. About 21,000 lung cancer deaths per year occur. It's the #1 environmental cause of any cancer. Radon is the #1 cause of lung cancer among people who have never smoked. And from CDC, 10 times the risk of lung cancer among people who smoke compared with people who never smoked with the same radon exposure. And that's what we're here about today. And about 1 in 15 homes in the U.S. have elevated radon levels above 4.0 picocuries per liter. The only real way to know if you have a radon problem is to test your home. That means all schools, all built environments, schools, daycare centers, workplaces should be tested for radon. Next slide. The real risk is the radon decay products from radon. Radon itself, we breathe that in, we breathe it back out, but it's the radon decay products from the radon that when radon decays, it decays into polonium-218 and polonium-214 that are solids. Radon is a gas, but the polonium-218 and polonium-214 are solids, and because it's being produced in the air, since radon is a gas in the air, it produces these solid particles that are now airborne that can attach to dust and different particulates, and now you have the attached fraction, and those that aren't attached to anything, we now breathe those in, they go directly into our lungs and emit ionizing radiation, or alpha radiation specifically. The alpha radiation are bullets that can cause direct and indirect damage to the lung cells and the DNA. Next slide. So the alpha particles, again, is 2 protons, 2 neutrons being emitted from the nucleus at a very high speed. They cause the most ionization compared to the other 2 types of ionizing radiation, which is alpha gamma radiation and beta radiation. So alpha particles from polonium-218 and polonium-214 cause the most ionization and potential genetic damage to the cells. And radon is a cancer-causing radioactive gas. Any radon exposure has some risk of causing lung cancer. Next slide. So how does this ionizing radiation cause cancer? Ideally, the gamma rays or the beta or the alpha particles can hit the DNA directly and cause damage to that DNA, which is part of a gene. Some of these genes have what we call a growth, they control growth. This gene gets damaged. Now the cell loses its growth control, starts multiplying, creating a tumor, and it can break off and metastasize and go to other places. And that ionizing radiation can cause those cells to go cancerous by direct and indirect interactions. Next slide. This is just another picture that's showing you that the language of the cells in the body is chemistry. Ionizing radiation knocks out orbital electrons, causes chemical damage to these DNA genes where they can mutate and lose their growth control, and now they start to multiply. And ionizing radiation, we know for a fact, can cause cancer. We have a lot of different studies that show that. Next slide. Now, this picture is specifically there. This is a real picture of a cloud chamber, and this really is your lungs. This is basically a house with 100 picocuries per liter. The cloud chamber is basically alcohol with dry ice, and what you are looking at is actually the tracks of the polonium-218 and the polonium-214 being emitted from the radon. Those are bullets of ionization that are hitting your cells, your lung cells, directly. Remember, this is the radon gas and the radon decay products we breathe in. So this is now real. I show this even to the public, and you sort of build this up, and they get a realization. This is happening inside my lungs. This is what it looks like inside your lungs. Next slide. So another key point to point out is for children, this comes directly from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry about toxicity. And get this, it says a child's different lung size, shape, breathing rates are compared with adults means higher estimated radiation doses. The risk of lung cancer in children resulting from exposure to radon may be almost twice as high as the risk to adults exposed to the same amount of radon. If children are also exposed to tobacco smoke, the risk of lung cancer is at least 20 times greater. That's really significant to look at. Next slide. So EPA, the action level is 4.0. The only way you're going to know is to do a radon test. And keep in mind that even radon levels below 4 still pose a risk. There is no safe level of radon. Even levels at 2 picocuries per liter can still cause radon-induced lung cancer. The 4.0 picocuries per liter is the EPA action level set by EPA. There is a World Health Organization action level that's a true health level based on epidemiology, which is 2.7 picocuries per liter. Next slide. CDC, again, this comes from the CDC website, that radon and smoking is a dangerous combination, that if you live in a home with high radon levels, smoking raises your risk of lung cancer by 10 times. This especially applies to radon professional and workers that are being exposed to radon and they smoke. So that is a key point that we want to point out. The importance of why we're here is to really reduce the amount, anyone that's being exposed to radon, we want to reduce that, but also people that smoke, you want to reduce your risk. And it seems to be quite clear that because of the synergistic effect, we would really want to stop smoking also. Next slide. The proposed mechanic concept, this sounds real technical, of the synergistic lung cancer risk of radon. What I wanted to do is just bring some of the basic science and some of the studies showing that synergy. Nate, where did that come from? Who said that? Is there any science behind that, which is the reason why we're covering this? Next slide. So there's a study done called the Residential Radon Exposure in Cigarette Smoking in Association with Lung Cancer, a match case control study in Korea. And they looked at a large number of people, both heavy smokers, light smokers, never smokers. And the conclusion of this study, in conclusion, we found both residential radon cigarettes and cigarette smoking to be associated with increased odds of lung cancer, and the difference in an odds ratio according to radon exposure was much greater in smokers than in non-smokers. Therefore, Preventative strategies targeting radon-related lung cancer should emphasize, in addition to radon-reducing repairs and ventilation engineering controls, both smoking cessation and withdrawing from secondhand smoke. Next slide. Now, what does smoking do? We want to look at what, how this relates to radon, but let's look at what smoking, how it affects the lungs. It increases and thickens the mucus in the lungs, clogging the airways. It initiates, irritates, and inflames bronchial tubes, causing respiratory infection. Harms cilia, causing more dirt and dust and particles to enter the lungs, and ravages the alveoli, causing breathing to become difficult. Next slide. So again, just another picture showing the risk of what tobacco smoke does. It has mutagens that actually cause mutations within cells. Our carcinogens actually cause cancer, DNA damage, mutations, and changes in the DNA methylation. The methylation is just a definition of adding other molecules that are attached to the DNA can cause that gene expression to change significantly. Next slide. Again, what is a chromosome? Just a basic 101. A chromosome is a structure found in the nucleus of the cell that contains genetic information. So just keep that in mind. And our lungs have lots of cells with these chromosomes in them. Next slide. So chromosomal aberrations in smokers. This is another study that was done. Synergistic effects of radon in blood cells of smokers, an in vitro study. Smokers have a higher level of chromosomal aberrations than non-smokers, including chromatid breaks, gaps, fragments, and dyscentric as the chromosomal aberrations. The intensity of smoking, but not the duration, is the predictor of the frequency of chromosomal aberrations. That's an important point. Chromosomal aberrations and cancer. There's a significant association between smoking chromosomal aberrations and increased risk of lung cancers. Subjects with cells that have high levels of aberrations have a higher risk of developing lung cancer. This study confirms the synergistic action of smoking and radon. And thus, lungs chromosomal damage from smoking could actually increase the radon decay product alpha radiation damage, with also a decrease in biological repair response mechanisms. So we're now starting to get the idea of when you are exposed to both smoking and radon as a synergistic effect. Next slide. So radon-induced chromosomal damage in blood lymphocytes. This is just more studies to show that, but the conclusion is the present study reveals significantly higher frequency of chromosome aberrations in smoker cells exposed to in vitro to radon compared to non-smokers. Thus, synergistic effects of smoking and radon is well established. Next slide. Now, just to talk about the cilia and smoking, smoking significantly damages the cilia, the tiny hair-like structures lining the airways, by paralyzing them and hindering their ability to effectively clear mucus from the lungs, which can lead to increased susceptibility to infections. And then the last line, essentially cigarette smoke disrupts normal function of the cilia, causing them to become less efficient at sweeping away pollutants and debris from the respiratory system. How does that relate to radon? With damaged cilia already there from people that smoke, radon decay products could travel deeper into the respiratory system and increase the ionizing radiation dose to the lungs. So that's a critical point that we want to look at, and radiation dosimetry and the effect of the cilia with smoking and radon. Next slide. The effects of smoke on non-smokers. Just some terminology that I thought was interesting for everyone to understand, that passive smoke inhaled by non-smokers. In 1992, it was classified as a type A carcinogen. Mainstream smoke, smoke that blows off after inhaling. And then side stream smoke that comes from burning tobacco that goes directly into the air, contains twice as much tar and nicotine as mainstream smoke. Next slide. Again, synergistic effects of the three different types of carcinogens. We got radon, smoking, and secondhand smoke. Basically, you see the synergistic effect of that, and that there's no doubt that these combinations cause cancer. Next slide. Guess what? If you have lungs, then you can get lung cancer. That's the whole point of this. Next slide. And the importance of taking care of your lungs. A LARA as low as reasonably achievable. Again, if you protect your lungs, you're going to live long and prosper. And our really mantra for the radon industry and the chemical vapor intrusion industry and their families is to protect your lungs in the workplace and at home. Next slide. This is my last slide, and we're done. Next slide. So my final statements, obviously test your homes for radon. Every single home, every single school, every single daycare center, every single built environment, including workplaces, should be tested for radon. Radon professionals, personnel, if you're smoking, vaping, you should stop because of the increased synergistic effect of getting lung cancer and other diseases. Also use adequate PPE and engineering controls. Same thing applies for the chemical vapor intrusion industry. And one of the things I'm going to suggest to the chemical vapor intrusion industry and them writing their standards and different things like that. One of the things for any chemical vapor intrusion where you're using active soil depressurization for mitigating or reducing the vapors underneath the slab, you should also do radon testing pre and post. That should be an automatic. After all, it's sort of hypocritical for us to talk radon and chemical VI risk prevention, and we don't do that prevention for our own lungs in our industry. The risks are real. And one of the solutions is the ALA, IEA, Freedom from Smoking Program. Thank you very much.
And let me begin here. I do want to thank Nate for his all his work. We wouldn't actually be having this presentation if it weren't for Nate's insistence and perseverance in pointing out the need for health and safety rules and guidance in the radon and VI industries. The next section, I'll be talking briefly about health effects of smoking, radon synergy and perspective, another look at that, and then also place that radon among other workplace risk prevention strategies. Next, please. But before I do want to ask folks to take a moment, take a breath. Nate did throw out a lot there all at once. If you do have questions, do be sure to add them to the Q&A box. We want to hear those and get to those. And Raul, I do want to specifically speak to anyone who's on this webinar who has a history of smoking, whether it's a past history or a current one. I want to take a little moment to address you folks, because I do recognize that this is a difficult topic, and we know that the great majority of people who are engaged in smoking or nicotine use behaviors began doing that when they were innocent children, not only teens, sometimes often preteens, and especially more these days with vaping products. And before they had any appreciation of the addictiveness of the substance or the long-term health risks of using things. People are clearly identified as having that higher risk of becoming more deeply entrenched with nicotine use the earlier they start, and we know this. We also know that the tobacco industry has engaged in a practice that has encouraged this youth smoking epidemic, because we know that that's where their new customers come from. People generally don't begin addiction as much later in life, once they have some appreciation of what this involves. We are not here to blame or shame. We recognize that people are truly victims of an industry that has hooked them. And we also recognize that addiction to nicotine is something that people need to approach on their own time frames. We're not all instantly ready to quit, but at the same time, and Jen will get to much later in the program, where we have some very good tools that we really do encourage people to take a look at and sign up for. This is a voluntary offer. It's not being coercive at all. We do want people, though, to tell folks your coworkers, your friends, your family about this program, because we know that this is something that can be useful. We do truly love you. We work with you. I know I do in my work with lots of folks in the radon industry. I have family members who smoke, so it is the kind of thing that we do recognize is out there. Okay, next, please. So back to this, health effects of smoking, radon synergy and perspective, and placing radon among the other workplace prevention strategies. Next. The American Lung Association is an organization that is interested in saving lives. We want to do it by improving lung health and preventing lung disease. And this whole issue here of radon and smoking touches upon these, mission imperatives very, very strongly. First of all, to defeat lung cancer, we want to champion clean air for all, and that means, of course, including indoor air. So we want that to be as free of radon as possible, as free of secondhand smoke as possible. And also, we want to make sure that we're working toward a future that is free of commercial tobacco use, commercial tobacco and nicotine use. So that's something that the Lung Association strongly wants for folks. And of course, as always, improving the quality of life for those with lung disease and their families through our three methods of education, advocacy, and research. Thank you. Next, please. Now, here's a few overviews. I want people to understand that smoking does harm nearly every organ in the body. Even though when people smoke, it comes in through the lungs and impacts the lungs very directly. There are many, many organs that are affected, and more research is identifying more impacts all the time. And it does, of course, lead to premature death. Next, please. And in fact, the idea is that I do want folks to understand that about 1 in 5 deaths every year in the United States is the result of a history of cigarette smoking, of tobacco use. And it's certainly a major cause of cardiovascular disease, causing 1 in 5 deaths from that. 1 in 3 cancer deaths is linked to smoking. Nearly all of the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease deaths are caused by smoking, increases the risk for stroke and so on. Next, please. Smoking is associated with, as a cause of diabetes mellitus, and certainly 38 million adults in the United States suffer from diabetes. Smoking, as many people already do know, is associated with all sorts of perinatal problems, so that problems before, during, and after pregnancy. And then, of course, secondhand smoke has been shown in the most recent Surgeon General's report, just released a couple days ago, to cause approximately 20,000 deaths a year in the United States. Next, please. Now, this is an overview. This gives you some picture, some estimates, and the idea is did some calculations showing, what the estimated annual smoking attributable deaths would be in this current year. And these are ballpark numbers and not exact, but at the same time, I'm quite confident that these do give you a very good picture. On the left, the highest bar, that's lung cancer due to folks with in people who have a smoking history. So there you have on the order of 130,000 deaths a year from that. There are other cancers, other organs that get cancer, 36,000. That alone is a significant number. Then there's a whole series of cardiovascular and the metabolic disease section in the middle there, where smoking history related coronary heart disease, 100,000 people. And then there's other heart disease, there's stroke and other vascular problems that people have, as well as diabetes. The third group of bars are respiratory diseases. And so again, another 100,000 people, the people with COPD. Excess it causes, because it promotes the likelihood that infection will cause death. Excess pneumonia, flu, and TB are also an increased number there. So on the order of 12 or 13,000 people. The perinatal conditions causes fires. We all know about smoking in bed leading to people's houses getting on fire. And then lastly, secondhand smoke. Certainly there's lung cancer there. and then about 15,000 people with coronary heart disease as a result of that exposure. So that gives you some idea of that whole range. So when sometimes you hear people talk about smoking equivalent in so many packs to radon, they're talking only about the direct lung cancer part. Okay, so I think the idea is that there are all these other health impacts from smoking that we want people to be aware of. We want to tell people the truth, that these are things that also need attention and can be prevented by not smoking, of course, but by quitting as early as possible as we can. And there are always benefits, no matter how old you are, to quitting smoking. Next, please. Now, this is an old information, but this is based on some analysis of 1995 statistics that was presented by the Environmental Protection Agency in its 2003 report on the assessment of risks from radon in homes. And this still gives you a good rough picture. This shows you where the 21,000 number comes from. And there are certain reasons to believe that in some respects it would be made higher by greater population, some respects made lower by smaller smoking rates. But the idea is here, clearly you can see that the number of deaths associated with lung cancer due to radon, 18,000 some in smoking in residential radon, and about 3,000 residential radon among those who have never smoked. So it gives you some idea. And the next, please. This graph shows you that whole largest rectangle shows you the deaths associated, lung cancer deaths associated with radon among those who have ever smoked. The largest rectangle, direct smoking deaths. Anyone who's smoked is in that category. But then the people who have never smoked are in the very small rectangle down at the bottom. And radon sort of fits over those. There is this idea that very, very clearly demonstrated by science that shows that when people have both the smoking exposure and the radon exposure, then that greatly increases their risk of radon-induced lung cancer. But nevertheless, and so that's about 1 out of 8 direct smoking deaths, 1 out of 4 not the deaths among the never smokers. So next, please. And this gives you an idea what the typical, approximate U.S. lung cancer mortality risk looks like among the different categories. The baseline is shown in the blue, and the idea is, we have look at current smokers, former smokers, and never smokers, and then the U.S. average. And you can see there's the current smokers. From just the U.S. annual average exposure, which isn't that high, 1.25 picocuries per liter, you can see that adds a couple percent in terms of the lung cancer mortality on top of the existing 10% chance of dying from lung cancer if you're a current smoker. Then former smokers, certainly, especially because that includes people who quit quite a long time ago, but they're still in that category. The baseline risk is only like about 2.5%, and then the radon risk is added on top of that. But it is still somewhat linked to that smoking history. Never smokers, you can see, much, much smaller, only about 1% lifetime chance of getting lung cancer and dying from it, and then a small, tiny sliver of added radon there that says 3,000 deaths. Next, please. This is at the EPA's action level of 4 picocuries per liter. Nate very clearly pointed out this is not a health-based standard. This is a standard that was developed a long time ago where it was thought, well, we can only mitigate down to less than 4, but we actually can do a lot better than that. Now we have a situation where look how big those red bars are. It's the same scale as on the previous graph, so you can directly compare them, but that gives you some picture of how much greater that risk is, even at the action level. So that's critical to remember, given especially that some of you are intermittently, of course, exposed to much higher numbers. Next, please. This is the standard table that people have seen. This is from the Healthcare Providers Guide, and it was in the Citizen Guide, showing that the estimated lifetime risks of exposure to a certain level of radon and whether you're a never smoker or a current smoker, showing that great dichotomy there. And at the U.S. average level, there's that 10 times number, 2 to 20. But then the higher up you go, there is certainly much higher numbers, but but there's a certain, you're running against the barrier. You can't have more than 1,000 people out of 1,000 getting lung cancer over a lifetime. So that current smoker number has to sort of shrink relative to the 10 times number. But that gives you some idea what we're talking about. Those are really significant numbers if you're exposed on a regular basis, like a quarter chance over a lifetime if you're exposed to 20 picocuries per liter and you're a current smoker all that time. Next, please. And this gives you an idea just at 20 picocuries per liter what those red bars would look like. I had to squeeze the graph, and that gives you some idea here. But here, even for a current smoker, the additional radon risk is greater than the risk from smoking all by itself. So that does give you pause, I think. And we do know that some of you routinely go into environments that are well above 20 picocuries per liter. Thankfully not, 18 hours a day, 70 years, but at the same time, those are part of your exposure picture, and it's important to keep in mind. Next, please. And the last slide on my part is certainly we want to help people prevent workplace injury, illness, and death. Stopping smoking is one of the ways to do that. And there's much more later on that subject. Of course, and this is sort of a little bit workplace safety and health 101. We want people to remember to assess their work environment for risks. Do radon testing. When you're entering the environment, so you know kind of what you're being exposed to, what you're dealing with. Chemical vapors of concern. Are there even confined spaces that you need to worry about? Combustion hazards. Is there something there that you don't want to catch on fire? Is there possibly carbon monoxide leaking out of a heating system? Pay attention to those things. There might be other respiratory hazards. I mean, Nate mentioned asbestos, I think, and there's fiberglass. There's going to be silica. Anybody who's drilling holes in concrete is going to find that. There might be mold problems. All of these things can be respiratory hazards you need to remember to protect yourself from. Physical hazards, nails and broken glass, debris. Anybody who's done any work in a basement, this is your bread and butter. You know that you need to sort of say this can be a lost time injury if you find out you're getting hurt just by getting yourself cut. Prepare the work environment. So that means go and make sure that you're getting adequate ventilation, make sure you're clearing, containing, segregating those hazards so that you don't get hurt. And then, of course, there's the necessity to do worker training and equipping in health and safety procedures. Make sure you're using the right tools for the right job. Personal protective equipment, of course, that's appropriate for the hazards and the work that you're doing. And I will then turn it over to the star of the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin, and thank you, Nate. A lot of really incredible information provided today. Now that you have all of this information, what can you do with it? And so first, I want to just touch base briefly on assessing the risk for lung cancer and really determining screening eligibility. Next slide. The American Lung Association is striving to increase lung cancer screening rates for all who are at high risk and eligible. And we know that increased early interventions and early stage cancer diagnosis reduces lung cancer morbidity and mortality rates. A study on early detection of lung cancer found that the only low-dose CT scan, that only that scan can actually reduce mortality for those that are at high risk. If you're not aware or would like to learn a little bit more about it, a low-dose CT scan is a special kind of X-ray that really takes multiple pictures as you lie down on a table, and it slides in and out of a machine. And the computer will then combine these images into a detailed picture of your lungs. Low-dose CT screening among those at high risk for lung cancer reduces the lung cancer death rate by up to 20%. So it is so very important to understand if you are at high risk and eligible. You'll see a QR code that is here on the screen, as well as the site it will take you to, should you want to take the brief 5-question quiz to see if you are, in fact, at high risk for lung cancer. Next slide. If you meet those requirements, let's say you take that test and it says you're at high risk and it says you're eligible, what happens next? So in this instance, you want to schedule a shared decision-making appointment with your primary care provider or clinician to really outweigh the risks versus benefits to you following through with the screening. And after that conversation, should both of you agree that you'd like to move forward, that's when your doctor will go ahead and order the screening. Next slide. Don't know where to start, don't know what part of the process you're in, potentially don't have a really close relationship with your primary care provider, we've got you covered. The American Lung Association's Lung Health Navigators are on standby to really help assist you throughout the entire process, whether it be checking into your insurance to see what may be covered, understanding, what a diagnosis actually means or what next steps may be, or finding a screening facility. Any questions pertaining to lung cancer screening or tobacco cessation, please never hesitate to reach out to our wonderful lung helpline as they are here to assist you. Next slide. Now I just want to touch base on some proven effective strategies, some tips to quit, and benefits of smoking cessation. Next slide. First, I'd like to start with some of American Lung Association's core beliefs as it pertains to tobacco cessation. And I think Kevin summarized it beautifully in the fact that we're here to assist individuals who want to quit. There is no forcing an individual into a quit attempt. You may have a nagging spouse at home. What we do understand is the best quit attempts really are those that you do for yourself. So we want to assist those who are motivated in making sure that you are provided with those evidence-based, proven effective tools to do so. We know that everyone can quit, regardless of how long you've used or what you're using. And you don't have to quit alone. We know that support increases your chances of success. And every single moment free from tobacco product use should be celebrated. If it's 4 hours, if it's 1 day, if it's 30 days, every single milestone is worthy of that celebration and success. And those individuals who do use tobacco products worked and learned how to use those products, right? So it's just as much of a process learning how to not use them and to stop. For most individuals, it takes several quit attempts before finally doing it for good, many of which could be between 9 and 11 quit attempts. So it's important to just never give up when trying, because not one size fits all. And a slip is not the same as a relapse. A slip is an unfortunate brief lapse in judgment. You kind of went into autopilot. Get right back on track with your quit attempt. Do not allow it to slip into a relapse. And biggest of all, next slide. Ensure that your tobacco treatment plan includes the 2 formula, right? The highest success rates we know come from those quit attempts that include FDA-approved cessation medication plus evidence-based behavioral counseling. So a program and medication together will give you the highest chances of successfully quitting and remaining tobacco and nicotine-free for good. Next slide. The FDA has 7 approved cessation medications available on the market, 5 of which you can get from your pharmacy. This is a great conversation to have with your primary care provider. And regardless of whether you're looking to go for one that may be prescription versus one that is over the counter, it's always good to get a prescription from your primary care provider to fill at the pharmacy, even for those over-the-counter products, as many insurance plans do cover tobacco cessation benefits and may in fact cover the cost of those patches, gum, lozenges, or any of the medications that you and your primary care provider decide to incorporate into your treatment quit plan. Next slide. Why is counseling so important? The reason is that this isn't just a habit. This is a dependency. It's a lifelong dependency. And when it comes to tobacco dependency, there is a 3-link chain of addiction that occurs. It's not just the physical addiction, the physical component of the puffing on the cigarette and the nicotine stimulating the alpha-4 beta-2 receptors in the brain, releasing dopamine, that happy feel-good chemical. It's so much more than that. It's also our behavioral component, that hand-to-mouth oral fixation. Every time I get in the car, lighting that cigarette before the car starts. These day-to-day learned triggers and activities where we incorporate it in. And then the sociocultural, aspect of it as well. Socializing with peers, kind of having this community. Many times when breaking free from nicotine addiction, you can kind of feel like you are more lonely, that you lost your best friend. So there are three big buckets of challenges that come with quitting that a behavioral counseling program can really assist in providing a plan on how you can address those to both minimize your urges and cravings, to reduce the intensity and frequency. Next slide. So this brings us to the behavioral counseling program that we are offering to you today, Freedom from Smoking. American Lung Association's Freedom from Smoking program has helped over 1 million individuals across the United States break free from nicotine addiction over the past 40 years. It is science-backed, evidence-based, and proven effective. And you can see some of the benefits we have identified through our ongoing evaluation and research. One of most we love to share, you are 6 times more likely to be smoke-free 1 year later than trying to do this on your own. So don't quit cold turkey. Really take advantage of this program opportunity. Next slide. Here's the opportunity. So given your audience, given your very busy schedules and your constant moving of locations, the best possible modality of freedom from smoking that we thought would be really easy is our pocket-sized version, right? So Freedom from Smoking Plus is our digital online version. This is now made available to all IEA members, vapor intrusion professionals, as well as your family and friends. We really want to help support this entire group in living a life free from tobacco use and reducing your risk of lung cancer. So as you can see here, you've got the QR code. You can sign up. I can tell you that even if you aren't planning to quit, but thinking about it for the new year, this is an excellent opportunity to scan it, get registered, and get the process under place, and just really to prepare yourself for that date. Next slide. If you do register, what are you going to go through? So this program is accessible 24/7. You can access it on desktop, laptops, your tablet, or even your smartphone. It provides 1 full year of ongoing support, which is really helpful in case you do have, let's say a relapse after your quit date. You can reset your quit date and start right back into a new plan. You can see the first 4 sessions of the 9 modules are really preparing you ahead for the quit attempt, with session 5 being your quit date. You will, in fact, be selecting your own quit date. This is a self-paced program. And then the remaining 4 sessions, 6 through 9, are all about maintaining that new tobacco-free lifestyle. This program is valid for all tobacco and nicotine product use. So even for e-cigarette users looking to quit, this program is perfect for you. Next slide. And if you have friends and family that potentially are under 18, considering that freedom from smoking is evidence-based and proven effective for 18 plus, we also have a program that is more tailored towards youth and adolescents under the age of 18. This would be through our Not on Tobacco program, notforme.org, and we'll be making sure to give you these QR code postcards that you can use and provide to family and friends who may be under 18. Next slide. And just want to provide a couple really quick tips to quit. Please know, as an ex-smoker myself, who has celebrated 20 years tobacco-free just this year, I know how difficult it is to quit, but I also want to let you know that quitting is possible. 50 million people in the United States are proof that it is possible, including myself. So here are some tips I would really love to provide. Don't do it alone, okay? Get as much support as possible through the program, as well as family and friends and coworkers. Quit. Don't switch to other products such as e-cigarettes. We know that they are not proven to be a cessation aid. And in fact, we are finding a majority of individuals who are transitioning to e-cigarettes are ending up dual users, concurrently smoking in addition to their e-cigarettes. And again, both of these are tobacco products. We want you to quit all tobacco products for good. You can do it. The quitting is actually a process and not an event. So don't get frustrated with yourself. Know that this is a chronic relapsing condition that requires repeat intervention and multiple quit attempts. Learn from those past quit attempts. They will strengthen your next journey. Use various techniques to deal with the urges and cravings, and make sure to reward yourself. You want to help manage the stress and the emotion that you're experiencing, and proactively working towards that is going to help minimize and reduce those urges. And then I want you to remember nope, not one puff ever, or for chewers, not one pinch ever. This came in handy for me in times that I really just wanted a cigarette after quitting. And, you know, we can really trick our minds into saying, well, maybe just one puff, maybe just one puff. No, you're going to wake back up those alpha 4 beta 2 receptors in your brain and go right back into the same dependency you were at, and many times even at a higher level. So just always remind yourself, not one puff ever. It's my choice, and smoking's not an option for me. Next slide. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with the benefits. Obviously, we know about the health benefits. The team ahead of me, you know, went through a lot of those health impacts, but also considering the impact on your wallet, your convenience from the hassle, the impact on your family and friends for secondhand smoke, as well as your quality of life. This really isn't even about quantity of life. It's about quality of life, quality of those years that you are here with those that you love. Because we know, in fact, when you can't breathe, nothing else matters. Next slide. Wanted to put this slide up one more time, just so that if you are inspired and would like to register for the program and prepare yourself ahead, remember, you can't climb a mountain without tools in the backpack. So this program is really here in place to help give you those tools to prepare you for that climb whenever you may decide to do it. Next slide. We will now go ahead and answer a few questions. I know there are a few that have been placed in the chat. Thank you so much for those. And also provided a QR code here for you to be able to download resources from today's presentation. And of course, we'll be making those made available later after the Q&A session when Diane closes us out as well. But let's go ahead and transition into some questions. Okay, for this, I would love to ask Nate and Kevin, would you mind coming back on camera? Thank you both so much. And I'm going to go ahead and toss this one out. Is it possible for an oncologist to determine if radon was the cause of cancer, and how? Nate, did you want to take a first stab at that one?
Yeah, basically there is no way for oncologists or any kind of medical test that exists to tell that you got lung cancer from radon. One, because there's no clear biomarkers. They are looking at certain types of gene damage from what we call high linear energy transfer ionizing radiation. There are several studies on that, but no one has found anything of any kind of, strong correlation or science-backed evidence to show that there's a smoking gun that because you were exposed to radon, this is why you got lung cancer. There's simply nothing existing now. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, sure. I definitely want to support what Nate just said. It is clear that there are some differences, some trends. You know, there's a more pronounced effect that smoking tends to lead to a type of cancer called non-small cell lung cancer. Certain kinds of genetic markers that Nate was referring to seem to be more prevalent there. It's the most common type of lung cancer. And then, you know, radon seems to be more associated with small cell lung cancer, which is kind of a double whammy here. It is something that tends to grow and spread quickly. It has a poor prognosis, but it is only 13 to 15% of the total cancers. It does tend to be caught late, because it is so aggressive, but it does usually respond well to chemo and radiation. So those are some of the differences, but you can't sort of say, oh, because you have small cell, you have radon-induced lung cancer. It's just a tendency toward how these things shake out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Kevin, are there any current statistics confirming lung cancer cases with radon levels that were present in the home?
Well, here's the thing. We have the epidemiology that very, very clearly identifies that there are, evidences of radon in residential structures that increase the risk of lung cancer. It's a population-based kind of thing. We're not going to be able, just as Nate said earlier, to be able to say, oh, your particular lung cancer was due to the radon in your home with 100% certainty. Although, we certainly have cases where people, haven't had a smoking history, haven't had an occupational history, haven't been exposed to secondhand cigarette smoke, have 60 picocuries per liter of radon of living in a home for a long period of time, and they have lung cancer. Yeah, that's the number one suspect. And the basic idea is, we need everyone who has lung cancer needs to be treated properly. We want to make sure that we want to prevent as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that. Nate, I have another one for you. Is there any evidence of childhood cancer risk directly attributed to domestic radon exposure?
There are some studies that are out there. One of the most recent studies, I think I sent you the link for that you can put in the chat, Jennifer, but that is the domestic radon exposure and childhood cancer risk by site and sex in 727 counties in the U.S. And this was a long-term study from 2001 to 2018 that definitely shows a correlation between radon exposure and childhood cancer, specifically leukemia and other blood type cancers.
Very helpful. And Kevin?
Yeah. Let me just chime in here too. There's a group of researchers at the Harvard Chen School led by Dr. Petros Koutrakis, and he has a whole team of folks looking at the possibilities of certain kinds of things being associated. There's a whole raft of things that show some associations with radon in the home. Now, these are associations. It's not necessarily a causal demonstration. That takes a whole lot more in the world of epidemiology. But there's more and more evidence coming out, as Nate pointed out, from the leukemia stuff, that it's starting to look clearer and clearer that leukemia is going to be, at some point, we're going to be able to move into the idea that looks like, from a possible cause to a likely cause or something like that of that particular disease. So pay attention there as research goes on.
Thank you both. I'm going to take a stab at this next question. Is there a difference between cigarettes and cigar smoking as it pertains to impact on health? So cigars and cigarettes are both dangerous to your health and pose similar risks of disease, cancer, heart disease, gum disease, emphysema, and chronic bronchitis. Cigars can contain more tobacco than cigarettes, sometimes as much as a full pack of cigarettes within a single cigar. And cigars also give off higher levels of carbon monoxide than cigarettes. Many studies suggest that cigar smoke is possibly more toxic than cigarette smoke. But again, both pose significant impacts and risks to health.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any last comments from Nate or Kevin before we hand it back over to Diane to close us out? Nate?
Yeah, there was one question about does HUD have anything dealing with radon? HUD has a whole program on radon now that they've introduced. They not only just for multifamily buildings, but for all of their programs, they introduce a very active, proactive radon policy program that is interjected to reduce radon exposure for all occupants of their buildings and portfolios that they handle. That is a mandate that they have. We can provide more information on that along with the links when we respond to the questions. We'll be glad to do so, working with the Indoor Environment Association and the American Lung Association.
Thank you, Nate. Okay, back to you, Diane.
Well, thank you, Nate, Kevin, and Jen, for presenting this important information. This concludes today's broadcast on radon smoking synergy, proven effective strategies to lower your risk for lung cancer. A recording of the presentation, as well as access to all resources mentioned throughout, will be made available on IEA's website. IEA members can earn 1 hour of continuing education credit. An email will be sent to all attendees providing specific information. We encourage you to download the referral resources and share this free cessation program offering with any family or friends who may be interested in quitting. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you and take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.